Hi, I'm Hallie, and I'm here to talk with you a little bit about preparing for on-campus recruiting. Going back to your journey, on-campus recruiting fits right into the job search section. You've already thought a little bit about jobs that you might like to have and preparing your unique value proposition for how you can approach those roles, but you haven't necessarily started submitting applications yet. And on-campus recruiting is likely to be a little bit different than anything that you've been through before unless you've been in a similar program. So let's start with what you can expect. The process is this. The career services team from your university works to bring companies or organizations to campus to recruit. Those companies often pay for this opportunity because it's very valuable for them. They might be footing the bill for the food and drink that's being served or even the location where the event's being hosted, and they'll definitely be dedicating their time and energy to make sure the event turns out well. They usually start by giving a presentation. Often that's hosted by someone from the human resources department, maybe a recruiter. And they talk a little bit about the company, its goals, the roles, and the teams that they might be hiring for. And they usually leave time for question and answer at the end, so you can make sure you've covered all the bases. Once the presentation section is over, you'll move on to a networking event in most cases. This is a transition from a classroom environment to a cocktail party environment. There will be food and drink being served, but the focus will be all on the networking. In a networking environment, it's important to remember that everyone has an incentive. So you'll need to think about the incentive of your target audience, which in this case is the recruiter. What does a recruiter exactly want here? Remember that their job is to fill a specific set of roles with the best possible candidate, which leads us to the question, what's the best possible candidate? The best in this case means a couple of different things, and as you've probably guessed, varies a little bit from company to company. But a few things that you can be sure they're looking for are someone who has the requisite skill and experience, but these are just the basics. They're also looking for someone who stands out, who would be exciting and fun to work with, who's a good fit for their company culture, and who really is someone that they consider a prospect for a good full-time hire. They'll be investing time to recruit and train you, and they want to believe that you're going to continue to add value over the time that you'll be at the organization. I mentioned that you'll need to stand out, and this is especially important because even if you make it to the final rounds of interviews, you won't be chosen for the job if you come off as bland or someone that they wouldn't like to have working at their organization. So if this all sounds a little overwhelming, don't be afraid, you're not alone. Many MBAs don't relish the prospect of charging into a room full of suited up financiers who have been kept late and are being forced to network with students. But don't worry, we've got some tips for success. Let's start with 3 things that you can do to prepare before you even go and right when you get started with the networking. First off, make sure you dress for success. This means dressing to the standard of the event. If it's an evening event and you're going to be meeting with senior executives, it's likely that you'll need to wear a suit. If you're not entirely sure what the dress code should be, think about dressing as if you were going to a client meeting, representing the firm who will actually be recruiting. If that's a bank, you'll probably need a well-fitting suit with a tie if you're a man. If it's more of an entrepreneurial or a startup organization, you probably can veer towards something that's a little bit more business casual, maybe jeans with a button down or a blazer. The important thing here is that you've done a little bit of research before you go into the networking environment. The research will help you understand how to dress for success, but also will help you learn a little bit more about the role that you might like to have and the organizational structure of the company so that you know who you'll be targeting and who you'd like to speak with. Tip number 2, make sure that you wear your name tag on the right side of your shirt or jacket. This way, when you reach out to shake hands with your right hand, the person who you're speaking with's eyes will be drawn to your name. This is a pro tip, so make sure that you think about it before the event, but don't spend too much time fussing with it. Next tip for you is if you're trying to balance food and drink, which is a pretty advanced move, make sure you put your drink in the left hand and try covering it with your plate. This leaves your right hand free to shake hands and continue nibbling. And finally, make sure you're looking people in the eye when you're speaking with them. This is actually harder than it sounds, but eye contact is your way of communicating to the person that you're speaking with that you're engaged in what they're saying. If your eyes are roving around the room, they'll believe that you're not interested in what they have to say and that you're just looking for the next person to speak with. For more, have a look at our guide on networking events. Remember that this is about empathizing with your target audience, and again, that's the recruiter. To set yourself up for success, try putting yourself in their shoes for a few minutes just before you walk into an event. If you're the recruiter, you've likely just done a full day at work, probably tired. You are now getting some food and drink, which may or may not be the most exciting part of the event, and you're hoping that nobody's blocking you from getting to attack that cheese tray. You may not have a ton of influence over the later stage of the recruitment process, so you're just looking for someone who stands out as an exciting person for your organization so that you can tell the hiring manager about them. Hundreds of students are probably going to approach you at this event, and they're going to pitch themselves, why they would be a great fit for your organization and why you should hire them. You answer their questions as best as you can, but in many cases you wish people would do a little Googling before they start. A lot of the questions that you answer throughout the evening could have been solved just by having a look on the website. It's kind of a rough assignment. Imagine you need to engage this person who has that, challenging night ahead. Really, it's important to stand out and make sure that you're seen as someone who would be fun and engaging to work with. Start by making the recruiter's experience fun. Don't do the sales pitch that everyone else is doing. Just approaching the conversation in a different way is already a great way to position yourself as unique. Do make sure you do some research in advance. The questions that you're asking should actually be relevant and exciting for a recruiter to answer. So how else can you stand out? Make sure you're recognizable. Imagine all of the recruiters, managers, and alumni huddled together after the event to fill out their feedback and make sure they sort through their business cards. They might have had a couple of glasses of wine or a few pints, and they're trying to sort through those 30 to 50 conversations that they've had over the course of the evening to come up with something memorable about the people that they met. What you want to happen is that when they get your business card, they say, oh yeah, this was the person that fill in the blank. That's your job. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. It might be by wearing something distinctive that's still business appropriate. Some people choose to wear a distinctive piece of jewelry or a tie that gives them a funny conversation starter. You might also open your story with a joke or something that you think is particularly relevant to the organization. There's many different ways to do this, and it will be different depending on your story and your background. If you're struggling to come up with a way that you might be able to stand out in the early stages of conversation, just go back to your value proposition. Then you need to think a little bit more about how to meet the recruiter's needs, which again, were to find the best possible candidate for filling the role that they've been tasked to hire someone for. That means that you need to find a few topics that are interesting to both of you, that relate to the recruiter, that they can enjoy answering, and that they can remember you for. You need a few good questions and you need to prepare them in advance. The topic should be professionally appropriate, but it doesn't necessarily need to be directly related to the organization. Remember that recruiters often have interests in things like recruiting. That can be professional development topics or industry relevant HR topics. Just make sure that you start with a few questions. One of my favorites is, how has the candidate profile that you're looking for evolved as the company has grown? Other things to keep in mind, particularly when you're speaking or engaging with other people at the event, who might be managers or alumni, is that you need to show them that you're in it for the long haul, for value for the company. Envision the future that you'd like to have working for that company, the job that you'd like to be doing, the skills and experience that you'd be bringing to work every single day, and invite the recruiter to envision that with you. This is also a good way to be upfront about your visa requirements. You can mention to the recruiter that the country that you'd like to be living in is the one that you're studying in, or perhaps a different one where you know the company has a location. This isn't duplicitous, it's just a way for you to showcase your vision for your life within the organization, one of your possible futures, and invite a recruiter to imagine that along with you. A few other good questions to keep in mind have to do with the expectations that you have going into the company. You can ask a recruiter or a manager about their expectations for someone who will be joining and what's changed since they started working there. You also can ask what surprise or what people's favorite part of working at a particular company is. You should find a way by the end of the evening to work in your contribution. This is your unique value proposition. So remember your positioning work and make sure your unique value proposition shines through in the questions that you're asking and the stories that you tell. You should have a few of these questions and stories prepared in advance. It's not easy to network with many different people over the course of the night. So if you've done a little practicing beforehand, things will come with more ease. You should be showcasing the skills and experience that you have rather than listing them. Don't show the fact that, or do show the fact that you are responsible by saying something like, I once swam through a pool of sharks to deliver a proposal on time. Just remember not to list the characteristics that you want someone to remember about you, but actually to showcase them in the stories that you've prepared.